By mistake, my alien housekeeper entered my quarters and froze in shock at what she witnessed. Beginning. The orbital station, Vera 7, drifted like a jewel against the velvet of space, its rings glowing with neon advertisements in a dozen languages. For the thousands who lived there, it was simply home, a halfway port between the inner colonies and the uncharted rim. For me, however, it was both refuge and prison. My name is Kalen Ward, a mechanic by trade, a wanderer by nature, and though I rarely admitted it aloud, a man who had run from more than one war. My quarters on Vera 7 were small, just a box welded onto the station's middle tier, but I liked the quiet. No commanders barking orders, no families asking why I never stayed. Just me, my tools, and the occasional hum of the air recyclers. When I first hired an alien housekeeper, it was out of necessity, not luxury. My schedule was too erratic. Sometimes I worked 20 hours straight patching hull breaches for passing freighters. Dust and oil built up faster than I could manage. The agency sent me someone they called Sira, a tall, lithe being of the Rinnathai, a race I had only ever seen in passing. The Rinnathai were known for their grace, long limbs, delicate translucent skin with faint patterns glowing beneath, like starlight trapped in flesh. Their eyes were large, opalescent, reflecting every hue of light. They were peaceful folk, rumored to dislike violence so much that even raised voices unsettled them. Sira rarely spoke, except to ask if I needed anything extra cleaned or organized. She moved silently through my quarters, rearranging the chaos I left behind. At first, I barely noticed her presence, but in time, I caught myself watching the way she lingered by my workbench, or how she tilted her head at the music I sometimes played from old Earth recordings. She seemed curious, but never intrusive. That changed on the night everything went wrong or right, depending on how you looked at it. Middle. It had been a brutal day. A mining barge had limped into dock, its hull scorched from plasma storms. I spent hours crawling through vents, welding fractures, and replacing filters clogged with toxic dust. By the time I staggered back to my quarters, I was drenched in sweat and grime. My only thought was to collapse, maybe drown the exhaustion in a glass of cheap synthale. But as I sank into my chair, I felt the weight of memories pressing down. Wars I'd fought, men I'd killed, the silence of comrades who never returned. Sleep never came easy. Instead, I reached for something hidden in my drawer, a small memory sphere. It was a legal tech, remnants from a battlefield scavenger. The sphere could replay recorded fragments of one's past directly into the mind. Dangerous, addictive, even harmful if overused. But it was the only way I could see her again. Her name was Leora, my wife. She had died years ago on a colony overrun by raiders. I hadn't been there to protect her. The guilt hollowed me, carved me into the solitary man I'd become. The memory sphere held our last moments together, her laughter, her touch, the way she had looked at me with love unshaken by war. As the device pulsed in my palm, I activated it. Light spilled out, coiling around me until my quarters faded, replaced by the echo of an old earth meadow where we had once walked. Leora's form shimmered, not entirely solid but heartbreakingly familiar. "Kalen," she whispered, and for a moment I could almost believe she was still alive. My chest ached as I reached toward her, fingers brushing against light. "I miss you," I said, voice trembling. I didn't hear the door slide open. I didn't hear Sira enter. When I turned, startled by the sharp intake of breath behind me, I saw her frozen in the doorway. Her wide opalescent eyes locked on me, on the glowing specter of Leora. Her hands trembled around the cleaning tools she carried. She looked as though she had walked in on something forbidden, something sacred. She began, but the words faltered. I scrambled to shut off the sphere. The meadow vanished, leaving only the sterile metal walls of my quarters and the silence between us. Shame surged through me. No one was supposed to see this, not the grief, not the weakness I kept hidden beneath layers of solitude. You weren't meant to see that, I muttered, my voice harsher than I intended. Syrah set down her tools, stepping cautiously inside. Her translucent skin glowed faintly, a Rinnathai reaction to heightened emotion. I did not mean to intrude, she said softly. The door, it was unsealed. I only came to tidy the room. I rubbed my face, trying to mask the grief still burning in my chest. Forget what you saw. But she didn't leave. Instead, she studied me with those luminous eyes, as if trying to unravel the tangled threads of sorrow. She was important to you, Syrah said gently. The words hit harder than I expected. My throat tightened. She was my wife. Silence hung between us, but it wasn't heavy. It was understanding. Finally, Syrah lowered her gaze. Among my people, we do not cling to the past. Memories are released to the stars. Yet I see that for you, holding them close is survival. I blinked at her, surprised by the insight. For weeks, she had been little more than a quiet presence in my home, yet in one accidental moment, she had pierced deeper than anyone had in years. That night, she didn't just clean my quarters. She sat across from me, asking questions, not intrusive but curious. About Earth, about Leora, about the wars I had fought. And in return, I asked about her people. She told me of the Rinnathai homeworld, where oceans glowed at night and cities floated like lanterns above the waves. For the first time in years, I spoke freely. And for the first time, I listened. Ending. Weeks passed, and Syrah's presence in my life grew from incidental to essential. She still cleaned, still moved gracefully through my clutter, but she also began leaving small gestures, a cup of tea waiting after long shifts, a repaired seam on my worn jacket, a note reminding me not to skip meals. One evening, as we shared a quiet meal, she said, "You live in a room of ghosts, Kaelin. Yet when you speak of her, your voice carries life. That is rare." I studied her, noticing how the soft patterns beneath her skin pulsed like living constellations. She was unlike anyone I had ever known, yet in her company, the weight of grief eased, if only slightly. Then came the night the station fell into chaos. A group of mercenaries tried to seize control of the docking bays. Explosions rattled the tiers, alarms screamed, and people fled in panic. My instincts as a former soldier surged back. I armed myself and prepared to fight. But when I turned, I found Syrah standing firm beside me. Though her people abhorred violence, she refused to leave. "You have lost enough," she said, voice steady. "I will not abandon you to this." Together, we navigated the chaos. I fought when needed, while she guided civilians to safety with calm determination. By the time station security regained control, we had saved dozens of lives. Afterward, standing amid the wreckage, I realized something had shifted. The memory of Leora still lived within me, but it no longer chained me. Instead, I saw the future reflected in Syrah's eyes. Days later, in the quiet of my quarters, I turned off the memory sphere and placed it in a box. Syrah watched silently, understanding the significance. "I'll never forget her," I said. "But I think it's time I stopped living in the past." Syrah tilted her head, her skin